खरीफ फसल ऋण तथा कृषि मियादी ऋणों दोनों पर चालू वर्ष के ब्याज को आज स्थगित किया जाएगा और मूल ऋणों को मियादी ऋणों में फिर से निर्धारित किया जाएगा। छोटे और सीमांत किसानों के मामले में यह ऋण अगले 5 वर्षों की अवधि में वसूल किया जाएगा, जबकि अन्य किसानों के मामले में ऋण की वसूली की अवधि 3 वर्ष होगी। इसके अलावा इन दोनों तरह के ऋणों पर 1 वर्ष के लिए आस्थगित किए गए ब्याज, जिसकी राशि 6040 करोड़ बनती है, की वसूली देयता के रूप में अगले कई वर्षों तक की जाती रहेगी। इन राज्यों में हमारे किसान भाइयों की मुश्किलों को और कम करने के लिए अब ये निर्णय लिया गया है कि खरीफ ऋणों पर ब्याज की पहले वर्ष की आस्थगित देयता को एक बारगी उपाय के रूप में पूर्णतया छोड़ दिया जाए। इस सुविधा का लाभ उठाने वाले हमारे ऐसे नागरिक ऋण देने वाले अपने बैंक से सीधे ये छूट प्राप्त करने के पात्र होंगे। इस संबंध में समुचित दिशा निर्देश भारतीय रिजर्व बैंक द्वारा जारी किए जाएंगे। जहाँ तक कृषि निवेश सब्सिडी का संबंध है, मेरी सरकार ने छोटे और सीमांत किसानों को 1490 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक की धनराशि अनुदान के रूप में देने की पहले ही घोषणा कर दी थी। तथापि सूखे की प्रचंडता को देखते हुए मैंने ये निर्णय लिया है कि इस कृषि निवेश सब्सिडी को अब आगे बढ़ाया जाए, ताकि एक बार की उपाय के रूप में और विद्यमान दिशा निर्देशों में छूट देते हुए 2 हेक्टेयर तक की अधिकतम सीमा तक बोए और बिना बोए दोनों क्षेत्रों के लिए अन्य सभी किसानों को भी इसमें शामिल किया जा सके। कृषि मंत्रालय द्वारा वित्त मंत्रालय के परामर्श से किए जाने वाले मूल्यांकन के आधार पर सभी 14 प्रभावित राज्यों को वास्तविक भूमि जोत और खेती पैटर्न के आधार पर अतिरिक्त राशि मिलेगी। इसलिए इन राज्यों को अब सूखे से निपटने के लिए 555 करोड़ रुपए की अतिरिक्त धनराशि दी जाएगी, जिससे या तो आपदा राहत कोष अथवा राष्ट्रीय आपदा आकस्मिक कोष से वहन किया जाएगा। पशुधन के लिए पशुपालन विभाग को अब 25 करोड़ रुपए की और अतिरिक्त धनराशि दी जाएगी, ताकि ऐसी गौशालाओं को सहायता प्रदान की जा सके जिनमें 1000 से अधिक पशु हों। ऐसी गौशालाएं चलाने वाले गैर सरकारी संगठनों को सीधे ही धनराशि अवमुक्त करने की अनुमति दी जा सकती है। पशुपालन विभाग, वित्त मंत्रालय तथा प्रधानमंत्री कार्यालय के अधिकारियों की एक समिति को इस तरह से धनराशि अवमुक्त करने का अधिकार होगा, जिस तरह प्रधानमंत्री राष्ट्रीय सहायता कोष के साथ साथ और अलग अलग मामले में धनराशि अवमुक्त की जाती है। मैं ये भी बताना चाहता हूं कि सरकार ने राजस्थान सरकार को पशुओं के लिए अतिरिक्त सहायता पहले ही अनुमोदित कर दी है, जिसमें 70 करोड़ रुपए पहले ही आवंटित कर दिए गए हैं। मैंने राज्य सरकारों को पशुओं के लिए चारे की निःशुल्क ढुलाई की भी मंजूरी दे दी है। पानी और चारे की निःशुल्क ढुलाई की ऐसी व्यवस्था जून 2003 के अंत तक जारी रहेगी। खाद्यान्नों के संबंध में सरकार ने सूखे से प्रभावित 14 राज्यों को 4000 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक मूल्य के 38-75 लाख मीट्रिक टन चावल और गेहूं के निःशुल्क आवंटन की पहले ही स्वीकृति दे दी है, जिसमें से 19-50 लाख मीट्रिक टन खाद्यान्न वर्तमान सूखा से राहत पहुंचाने के लिए है। यह खाद्यान्न केवल 3 महीने अर्थात जनवरी 2003 तक के लिए है। तत्पश्चात अधिक खाद्यान्न जरूरतमंद राज्यों को उपलब्ध कराया जाएगा। तथापि वांछनीय है कि राहत रोजगार के सृजन हेतु इस खाद्यान्न के वास्तविक इस्तेमाल की सुव्यवस्थित ढंग से निगरानी की जाए। निस्संदेह राज्य सरकारें आवंटित खाद्यान्नों के इस्तेमाल के बाद अतिरिक्त आवंटन प्राप्त कर सकती हैं। इसी संदर्भ में सार्वजनिक वितरण प्रणाली की कार्यपद्धति में सुधार लाया जाना चाहिए। मैं इस बात को मानता हूं कि देश के सूखा प्रभावित क्षेत्रों में जल की अत्यधिक कमी है। इसलिए मैंने रेल मंत्रालय को अतिरिक्त जल टैंकर ट्रेनें चलाने का निर्देश दिया है, ताकि इस जल संकट को कुछ हद तक कम किया जा सके। जल संसाधन मंत्रालय प्रभावित राज्यों को सहायता पहुंचाने के लिए इस संबंध में एक कार्य दल का शीघ्र गठन करेगा। मैं पेट्रोलियम मंत्रालय को भी निर्देश दे रहा हूं कि वह गहरे नलकूपों के लिए गहरे ड्रिलिंग रिगों का उपयोग करने की संभावना का पता लगाएं। हमें इस सूखे की चुनौती का एकजुट होकर सामना करना है और यह सुनिश्चित करना है कि हमारे नागरिकों की सभी मुश्किलें कम हों।
आप बोलेंगे? स्पष्टीकरण बाद में होंगे, अभी प्रधानमंत्री जी को जाना है।
Thank you, sir. So, we just heard the statement from the Honorable Prime Minister, where one of the factors mentioned in relation to the drought-hit areas was that food grain worth 4,000 crores would be made free to those areas. Now, when the mention was being made about food riots in India, that this is a situation which we envisage, even without this 4,000 crores being made free to the states, 35 kilograms of food grain, rice and wheat made available to a crore families every year at a rate of rupees 2 or rupees 3 per kilogram. If we convert it at the international currency rates, the family's food bill of 35 kilograms of wheat and rice would be anything between $2–2.5. That is the kind of situation that the government of India, on account of the surplus, has been making available to the poorest of poor. Now, this is by any stretch for the Indian state, not a very developed nation, a great achievement. But we have still preferred to visualize a situation where we see horrors of food riots taking place as far as the country is concerned. Now, this is a situation which I mentioned is long over, which is no longer due. You mentioned, how do we generate the educational resource of the country? Well, you were absolutely right. It is the duty of the government, and the government indeed, even by amending the law, has said primary education will be a fundamental right. Through the 90s, we opened out, we unshackled ourselves even in these areas. What is the situation today? There are areas where people who have grown out of your institutions, your human resource, which is now in a position to actually make it impact in major establishments, academic and industrial, corporate, world over. The reference, I remember when I was in college, and one of the subjects we used to always debate and say and express concern about was the brain drain. We spend money on them and they leave the country. Recently, I went back to the Delhi University to attend a function, and I had a young student speaking ahead of me, and he was very proudly using a different phrase. He said, well, we are now a brain bank. And one of the changes which has taken place through this period which you feel concerned about is, I remember a situation 10-15 years ago, one state, one regional engineering college. Ask any honorable member from Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, as to what the situation in their states now is. Karnataka, a small state like Haryana, today can proudly boast of 27 engineering colleges. That is where the situation today has grown. Quality needs to be improved. IT institutions. These are all areas in which we have been growing, and therefore to say these are all areas where we still to paint the economy and the country backward, I think is perhaps not a very fair assessment of the situation. One more issue, when my learned friend Mr. Basu spoke in terms of how do we make ourselves competitive and areas of concern, I think is an area which at some stage when you speak in terms of consensus, I can quite appreciate his and his party's difficulties in being a part of that consensus. How do we now create a labor law regime which is going to make our economy and our manufacturing industry equally competitive? You may speak in terms of a labor law regime which is status quoist, which is the present situation, where you may actually visualize yourself as a friend of the labor and champion the cause of the present labor law regime. But any regime which is contrary to the growth of generation of employment in the long run will never be labor friendly. And this is also one area when we speak in terms of a larger consensus, many including my friend Mr. Basu's party will also have to come around as far as this area is concerned. I see opposition by the Congress party as far as New Delhi is concerned, but I also see the Congress party in this area at least making some good headway as far as Maharashtra is concerned. because it is the chief ministers who know where they need a lot more flexibility as far as those areas are concerned, because those are the areas which you need actually to grow in terms of. Sir, there was a comment which was made by the preceding speaker, which was certainly contrary to the policy of disinvestment or privatization which the government of India has followed.
आप एक मिनट के लिए बैठना। सदन की राय के अनुसार मैं सुझाव रखता हूँ कि सदन की कार्रवाई आज जब तक सारी कार्रवाई समाप्त नहीं हो जाए तब तक
सर, जहाँ तक हम लोगों का सवाल है, ये तय हुआ था कि आज हम सिर्फ ये डिस्कशन करेंगे। बाद में ये जो बिल हमने चर्चा किया है, ये डाला गया है लिस्ट ऑफ बिजनेस में। लेकिन सर, ये तो 4 घंटे का चर्चा है, अब कितना देर तक बैठना है?
कितनी देर बैठ सकते हैं आप?
नहीं, मेरे ख्याल में हम 6 बजे तक करके कल फिर दोबारा ये चर्चा करें।
अभी 6 तो बजने दीजिए,
क्योंकि साफ बात हुई थी संसदीय मंत्री से।
We will conclude it today itself. Because tomorrow there are some important legislation I have already mentioned.
हाँ, करिए, शुरू करिए आप। सदन की अनुमति है कि 6 बजे तक सदन की कार्रवाई चालू की जाए। हैं, ठीक, चलिए।
Sir, I'll complete in a few minutes, sir. Sir, the comment which was made against the privatization or the disinvestment policy of the government, I have, sir, now come across a new philosophy which has been propounded, where it has been said that, well, if you want to privatize, don't privatize profit-making units. Now, this seems to be a categorical statement, particularly which the Congress party has now been making. So, I find this statement somewhat surprising for the reason, in the first instance, we must keep in mind that units which are profit-making, and particularly profit-making in a monopoly or a regulated regime, will not always continue to be profit-making. I remember our steel plants, for which our first Prime Minister had used the famous phrase, the temples of modern India, were a great endeavor. Today we find in a competitive regime and a globally competitive regime, some of those plants are producing amongst the costliest steel in the world. What do you do with units which were envisaged to be profit-making, which were great institutions at one time, have today ceased to be profit-making? Secondly, if we analyze the performance on this front of the Congress...
For a second, as you mentioned the policy statement of the Congress party on disinvestment debate, I made it quite clear that these two phrases you are omitting, in competitive environment, profit-making unit in competitive environment, and a recurring profit-making unit, not once in a blue meat, those profit-making units should not be sold.
Sir, if I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member Shri Mukherjee.
कल आपके लिए कोई पूछेगा कि आप दीपक
A lot of consensus was there. You let him ask his own allies instead of asking Congress and left. Let him ask this question to the Shiv Sena, to Samta, to other allies. What is their views on this, and then come to us.
Sir,
and ask Mr. Namnayak also.
Sir,
ask Mr. Namnayak also.
What is your opposing?
Every party has said profit-making undertaking should not be disinvested.
Sir, as far as Shiv Sena is concerned, we are in NDA, and whatever the decisions has been taken in NDA, we are abide with it.
No, thank you. तो करिए, खत्म करिए आप.
Sir, yes, Shri Mukherjee is absolutely right. Shri Mukherjee is absolutely right when he says, I am reaffirming and repeating what Mr. Arun Shourie has repeatedly said, because despite the fact that Mr. Arun Shourie has very convincingly reiterated it, Mr. Basu chooses to repeat that, and therefore it is necessary for me to rebut something that he has stated. If we look at the period 1991 to 2000, 2000 is the period when there was a significant shift from sporadic market sales to strategic sales. If we look at the first period, where 39 PSUs were divested and divested in small minority holdings. That is when for the first 5 years Congress party was in power. For the next 1.5-2 years, it was the United Front government was in power. Do we recollect which were the PSUs which were divested? It's a different matter that we have an ideological difference with the Congress party on the methodology of that divestment. But that difference apart, the difference being that we changed over to a strategic sales system which we believe brought better values, better PE ratios as far as the exchequer was concerned.
BSNL also.
Yes, VSNL also. VSNL also.
Centaur Hotel also.
Yes, Centaur Hotel also and VSNL also. Since you mentioned VSNL, since you mentioned VSNL, since you mentioned this, sir, the PSUs which were divested when Congress was in power, if you recollect them, you had shares of Indian Oil, you had shares of HPCL, you had shares of BPCL, you had shares of VSNL, and curiously enough, when the United Front government was in power, which your party was supporting, which his party was supporting, his favorite share of VSNL was divested during the period when United Front was in power, when the CPIM was supporting. Therefore, when you say VSNL, you must recollect that you are supporting a government.
We are still supporting. If you divest to strengthen that company, we are still supporting. But you are privatizing without any rhyme or reason with an undervalued price.
चलने दीजिए चलेंगे तो
Sir,
थोड़ा
sir,
ठीक है
since a statement has been repeatedly made,
थोड़ा बहुत चलता रहना चाहिए
sir, I may just mention, since there is a concern with regard to values, I'll just give you the values of the 5 most blue chip PSUs divested during 91 to 98. Indian Oil Corporation, the PE ratio which it got was 4.9. BPCL got 5.7. HPCL got 5.9. And VSNL, which you wanted to know, got 6. As against this, if you see the PE ratios through the strategic sale which Mr. Arun Jaitley has done, Balco got 19, CMC got 12, HDL got 37, IBP got 63, IBP
Limit to everything.
sir, if an undervaluation took place, the undervaluation was
He doesn't understand the concept.
और आप देख देंगे ना नहीं ये तो जरूरी है क्या वो करें आप करें नहीं वो सब सुनने दे रहे हैं आप चिंता ही मत करिए सब सुन रहे हैं और सुनने भी दे रहे हैं
Mr. Chairman, I think this debate should be conducted in a manner in which I think both sides, despite their differences, I think do recognize that there is some basic truth. And the Honourable Minister, for example, is quoting figures in a manner which is completely uncomparable. What he has done or what this government has done is sold the management. In our case, it was an act of divestment, but we did not change the public sector character. So you are comparing the unlikes and then you draw the...
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Leader of Opposition for mentioning this. I am very grateful to the Leader of Opposition for mentioning this. The debate was being conducted by us precisely in the spirit in which he mentions. It is precisely this point that we made, that we disagree with the methodology in which they carried on the process of disinvestment. It was a process which got lesser values. It's a process which didn't bring in aggressive investors. It was a process which did not bring in more investment into these units. It is the process which neither brought investment nor new technologies, continued with the same public sector managements, and therefore did no good as far as the management of the PSUs was concerned. It is this precise point, sir, that I was making. Sir, we followed a route which is in terms of economic management of these PSUs a more correct route. It's brought better dividends as far as the PSUs are concerned. It's brought greater investments to them. And as far as the labor interests are concerned, it is those interests which have remained protected, not only protected, in fact, they have been more than protected, because in almost each of the units which have been divested, there has been, in a large number of them, there has been a significant increase as far as the labor salaries are concerned. Sir, I must say once again that the Finance Minister has added a new chapter of transparency as far as the management of the Indian economy is concerned. He's brought a midterm review of the Indian economy. It's an occasion, as the leader of opposition rightly says, we must debate upon this document. But when we debate upon this document, if issues of policy correctives are raised, I think it is time that those issues of policy corrected are debated. And as Mr. Basu had mentioned, can we then have a consensus on some of these issues? He used the word consensus, but he wanted a reversal of everything that happened from 1991. I'm afraid that is something which will never be acceptable to my party. Thank you.
Sri P.C. Alexander.
Mr. Chairman, I should express my gratitude to you for giving me this early chance in the course of this debate. As was pointed out by an earlier speaker this evening, normally the chances go to the representatives of the both parties. You have been kind enough to call me an independent in this House to intervene in this debate early enough, and I am most grateful to you for that. Mr. Chairman, I would start by congratulating the Finance Minister for the very innovative step he has taken in bringing out this report at the end of 6 months. What has impressed me most about this report is the brevity of the report. Normally, when we were all in the government, and I am sure my successors in the government now also have a tradition of thinking in terms of 150 pages if it is a report to be given to the Parliament or a committee. But here I find a very important subject being presented in a very brief manner, precise but transparent, of 40 pages. And I wish to congratulate the Finance Minister for bringing out this information in so brief a report as he has done today. Mr. Chairman, I do not want to go into all the details that are contained in this report. Already the distinguished speakers before me have mentioned what they consider as the areas of concern to the nation, the shortcomings in the implementation, and they have also pointed out from the other side the advantages of the report in highlighting the achievements of the last 6 months. I do not want to go into it, though I had thought of making a few observations on that. But after listening to the debate here, I thought the basic issue of the rationale of liberalization or globalization itself needs a redefining. More importantly, the role of the state in liberalization needs redefining so that we who are the representatives of the people here, and through us the people as a whole, will understand what we mean by liberalization or globalization. If you read the newspapers or listen to the speeches of political leaders, you get really confused, because there are some people who go on telling people in India that after 1991, India has sold its future to the multinationals. The liberalization route that was taken by Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao during his great administration as Prime Minister was one of the biggest mistakes that had been committed. On the other hand, there will be another section which believes that liberalization means or globalization means just following what the United States France or Germany or advanced countries of the world have done in their time in their countries. I thought I will use the time that you would permit me to just present my views as to what policy of liberalization should be for a developing country like ours. And I would devote my talk only on that issue because I feel that we have to have a focus on where we stand on the issue as a nation, particularly after the word consensus had been used by Mr. Basu and also by another speaker before me. At least let us try to define what liberalization is in the Indian context and what the role of the state is in the Indian context, and see whether we can have a consensus on that issue. Mr. Chairman, I wish to invite the attention of the House through you to the fact that we have never and we have not yet, as of today, given up the philosophy of a mixed economy. There seems to be a great confusion in thought in our country on that. When we became independent, two options, clear options were available to us. Two models were available to us. The United States model or the Western democracy model and the Soviet Union model or the controlled economy model. The great leaders of our country at that time weighed the pros and cons of these two models and took a conscious decision, a deliberate decision, that we should have a model neither adopting all that the United States or the Western democracies have done, nor accepting what the controlled economies have done, and we chose deliberately the mixed economy model. It is my view, and I say it with full sense of responsibility, that there is a consensus in this country that we should continue on this mixed economy model. While we go take the route of liberalization, we should not give up the mixed economy model. On that, I am sure we can start the process of aiming at liberalization. Then what else can be done to get consensus on the issue of liberalization? My suggestion to the Honorable House through you is that we have to educate our people, our leaders also, that each country has to have its own decision as to how far one can advance in liberalization or structural reforms. What has been proved successful through structural reforms in the Far Eastern countries, the so-called Asian tigers, or what had been proved failures in some of the Latin American countries should neither be an example nor a warning to us. Every country has to choose its model depending upon what its requirements are, what its situation is, and what can be accepted and what can be rejected. I will give my own idea as to what the model of our country should be. The first principle, according to me, should be, after accepting that we are still a mixed economy, after accepting that we are not going to opt any other model without change, my first suggestion should be, or my first step would be, we take a conscious decision ourselves about timing, phasing, and sequencing. We should not allow anybody else to dictate to us about the timing of structural changes, about the phasing out of what should be phased out, about the sequencing, what should come first, what should come second. A sovereign country like ours should not be influenced either by writings of the Western philosophers, thinkers, economists, or by the persuasions of international organizations or World Bank or Monetary Fund. We have to be masters of these three decisions: timing of the changes, phasing of the changes, phasing out, and then sequencing of these changes. That would be the first decision that we have to do. The second point to be borne in mind is, even in liberalization, it is admitted that the crucial thing to be taken into account is the element of competition. You can't compete with the advanced countries. You can't compete with Japan or with Germany. Competition is the essence, the core of liberalization. You can't ask a village wrestler to have a wrestling match with a sumo wrestler and say both are wrestling. Our country must take into account our limitations and our strong points and enter areas, go for changes in areas where competitive advantage would be ours. And my third point is the state, by divesting itself of what it should be, it should have divested earlier of roles in manufacturing, need not divest itself from the responsibility of managing the key sectors of the economy and the key policies of liberalization. In my opinion, for a country like ours, where gross disparities of income exist, where the poor are really very poor and the rich are filthy rich, the state has to play a very decisive and positive role, even in the area or even in the era of liberalization, in ensuring that economic justice is maintained in our country. I am making a very important point because the general impression is that once liberalization is introduced or structural adjustments are made, the state fades away. The state should never and will never fade away, or should not be allowed to fade away, because state intervention is much more relevant, important in a country like ours, and that cannot be forgotten, and state should continue to have its intervention. It may be intervening by introducing proper accounting systems by private sector and public sector, proper auditing system, appropriate control over the stock market operations, preventing the frauds and the scams that take place in the banking system. Whatever it may be the sector, in liberalization or after liberalization, the state should have this dominant role. And the next point is, the state should not be a soft state once we opt for liberalization. We are hesitant to take decisions which we consider are very necessary for the upliftment of our economy. Because in our country, elections take place almost every time, every month, if I am exaggerating, at least every 6 months. Either it is an election to the parliament or to the state assembly. If that is not, there are elections to the local bodies. And keeping the elections in view, the political leaders always think of what should be done, and we convince us this is what should be done, hesitate and postpone it till the elections are over. And then come another set of elections. And this is what I mean by saying a soft state. Our hesitation to take hard decisions, our reluctance to face the realities and think of the remedies which are necessary for bringing up the level of our people, this is at the root of our serious problems. I always talk about, and I have always talked about in other fora, about the unmerited subsidy that is in our system. I am not talking about the subsidy in agricultural sector or the subsidy for the poor people through the PDS, but there are certain sectors where subsidy is totally unmerited and nobody is willing to take the steps. I mentioned the case of higher education in our country. We should subsidize higher education for the children of the poor, those who are below the poverty line, children of the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes. But why should my son or my grandson pay 20 rupees or 30 rupees per month as fees in a first grade college and get away with that? Because the rule is higher education cannot bear a higher rate of fee as at present. Thousands of crores of rupees have been wasted on unmerited subsidy in higher education. I may give only that point to illustrate my point. Having said these 4 or 5 points, let me also mention 4 more important considerations which should be borne in mind by the political leaders of the country, and with that I will conclude. We should take care to ensure that liberalization which we adopt and which we should adopt and which we should continue does not result in joblessness. And if we create unemployment, then you will find people on the streets, not because of food shortage, as has been said by Mr. Basu. If we create unemployment, we will create unrest, and it will lead to disastrous consequences. You have to be very careful in adjusting the pace of liberalization and ensure that joblessness doesn't come out as a byproduct. Secondly, liberalization should not result in ruthlessness. It should not make the rich people filthy rich and the poor people poorer by whatever step you may take. You have to keep a balance always in our decision-making process, that the impact should not be ruthless and mindless. Thirdly, you should make sure that whatever we do by way of liberalization does not mortgage the future of our children. It has to be sustainable growth, not growth at any cost. And if it is sustainable growth that we should keep in mind, we should be mindful about impact on the environment and various other health and various other factors. Fourthly, we should make sure that liberalization also leads to the empowerment of the disadvantaged segments of our society, particularly the women. And if we lose sight of the goal of empowering the disadvantaged segments, like women, scheduled castes, and scheduled tribes, we will be defeating the purpose of liberalization. We would have created wealth and improved, in statistical terms, the growth rate, but we would have added on to the disabilities of women, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and the economic sections. And finally, Mr. Chairman, and I give great importance to this, we should consciously ensure that the liberalization process does not subvert the cultural heritage of our country. We are not people who will blindly choose, we should not be people who will blindly be led into an alien culture through the route of liberalization, and which our children should not think that liberalization means imitation of the people in Paris or London or in New York. We are proud of our ancient culture, the values of our ancestors, and we have to preserve the heritage that we have without being subverted or devalued by liberalization. I have made about 8 points in my intervention, and if we have a consensus on these goals and objectives in the manner in which I have placed before the House through you, Mr. Chairman, I feel we will succeed in enlisting the cooperation of all sections of political opinion in favor of liberalization. One more word and I will close. It is wrong even to talk about the folly of what was done by P.V. Narasimha Rao or Manmohan Singh in 1991. We have gone a long distance. We can't ask the globe to stop so that India can get out of it. The globe is going on. A new era has been created. We are party to the creation of that era. So we are already in the process of liberalization. We are signatories to major agreements. At this stage, to say that we want to get out because we can't proceed, we will be opting the fate of a Myanmar or a North Korea if we do that. It is a settled fact of life that liberalization was the deliberate choice of the people of this country. And if it is put before them clearly what exactly it means, that it doesn't mean depriving the state of its responsibilities, it doesn't mean ignoring the rights of the people who are unemployed, when we can certainly create a big consensus in favor of our policy. With these words I conclude, and thank you once again for giving me this chance.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander, for your maiden speech. प्रधानमंत्री आपको जवाब मिल जाएगा, आज मिले कल मिल जाएगा।
नहीं,
काल तो पड़ा हुआ है ना।
क्या सर?
अकाल तो है,
अकाल है।
आज भी और कल भी रहेगा। तो कल
लेकिन
पूछ
अकाल
लेना।
में जो सहायता प्रदान
हाँ,
होती है वो कम है, इसलिए
सहायता प्रदान की है, वो कल पूछ लेना, ऐसी क्या बात है। मुझसे
दिया नहीं है, जब तो हम पूछना।
देयर इज ए मैसेज फ्रॉम लोकसभा सेक्रेटरी जनरल।
Sir, I beg to report that the Lok Sabha at its sitting held today on the 18th of December 2002 passed the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Orders Amendment Bill 2002. I lay a copy of the bill on the table.
फिर आंसर दिया 1 मिनट में 1 मिनट। वैसे सदन की कार्रवाई 6 बजे तक के चलाने के लिए मुझे अनुमति दी है, लेकिन मैं ऐसा समझता हूँ कि जनरल डिबेट आज समाप्त हो जाए और मंत्री जी का जवाब कल हो जाए, वो ज़्यादा अच्छा रहेगा। इसलिए आज डिबेट खत्म होने के लिए मैं माननीय सदस्यों से निवेदन करना चाहूँगा कि कम से कम समय में बहुत गंभीर से गंभीर बात कह जाएं, वो ज़्यादा अच्छा रहेगा।
Thank you, sir. So I am happy that the government has initiated a new step, took a new initiative in bringing out the mid-year economic review for the first time. And it is heartening to note that the economy will grow by 5 to 5.5%, and the exports have registered 13.5% growth rate, and that the imports have registered a negative growth rate of 10.5%.
Your number is there.
These are all the figures given in this document, sir. And even the revenues have increased at a rate higher than the corresponding figure of the previous year. And overall, the picture that has been given in this document is economy has not taken a beating. But sir, the figures give some indication, but I have got my own doubt about the veracity and accuracy of the figures, because this is only a mid-year, because we have been doing all these estimates, quick estimates, revised estimates, all are subject to changes. But however, sir, the stupendous task, the Herculean task before the government is to achieve the 8% growth rate, as announced by the Honorable Prime Minister. Already 2 years are being over. Last year we could able to achieve some 5.3 to 5.4% growth rate, and this year, as the document says, we are going to achieve 5 to 5.5. In the next 3 years, we have to achieve minimum 10% of growth rate, so that the 8% growth rate can be achieved in this 9th 5-year plan. But what are the structural changes or infrastructural strength that has been added now to achieve this 8% growth rate? And the document says the capital expenditure has grown by only 3.6%. And the revenue expenditure is up by 13.5%. Sir, in a sound economy, 90% of the government borrowings has to be spent for asset creation. Otherwise, it's very difficult to achieve the growth rates. And as per this document, credit has not been expanded even after the substantial reduction in the interest rates. Sir, earlier speakers also mentioning about the low rate of inflation. Sir, is it, can it be considered as a real achievement? Because in the post-liberalization period, the real incomes of the people, I am emphasizing the word real income, of the people has gone considerably, has gone down. And there is no money at the disposal of the common man to buy the more goods. So as such, they are not constituting the bulk demand for the goods in this country. So this low rate of inflation, in my opinion, has got no relevance. And with regard to foreign exchange reserves, every time
government has been claiming. 60 billion dollars, US dollars. But is it out of trade surplus? For the past one decade, the trade deficit was around $30 billion. So the accounting figure or the statistical figure may be 60 billions. But how we have got this 60 billion, if you make an analysis, that's not a encouraging this thing. But how to achieve this 8% growth rate, sir? But it has to be achieved. Otherwise, we will lose the rating of at least classifying as a developing economy in the world. We have to achieve the 8% growth rate so that we can improve the economic standards of the people. And we have opened the economy to the market forces, and import duties have been drastically reduced, and quantitative restrictions in so many items has been removed, and there is a permission of free flow of capital and it has been permitted for free flow of capital and technology in this country. And in spite of this, sorry madam.
It's all right.
And it is because very frequent changes, so we could not able to get.
Continuous change.
And it's the second largest scientific pool in this world. India has got. And a vast reservoir of English speaking people. Very high technology. We have got nearly 40 and world famous laboratories in this country. And a free press, independent judiciary, and a very vibrant democracy that is prevailing in this country. So in spite of that, why we are unable to achieve this growth rates, why you are unable to achieve the foreign direct investments into the manufacturing sector? Because we are unable to mop up the resources domestically. So the next alternative is to have to depend on the foreign direct investment. And we are unable to get it. Why the government has to make an analysis of this? Sir, my analysis says this because of 2-3 reasons. One thing is the image of India at global level has to be improved. The need of the hour is to improve the image of the country at global level. And locally we could not create the demand for our own goods. And one member was telling that more than 50 million tons of food grains are rotting up in the godowns, and people are not having the capacity to buy it. Why? What is the dichotomy? Because we have failed considerably for the past 3-4 decades to improve the economic standards of the people so that they can buy 2 square meals a day. And what are the government's efforts to achieve this objective? And compared to the international standards, our productivity levels are very low. We are unable to compete with the global competition on cost, on quality. So the need of the hour is to improve the productivity in the industrial sector and agricultural sector.
He didn't ask.
And we are nearly 70% behind the growth rate of in our industry compared to China. 80%. 80%
Now
compared
you can wind up like I'm winding my...
Madam, first 4 speakers were given maximum time and...
No, but that was the... See, I'll tell you. The one who initiated, the one who was to initiate, and the one who was making the maiden speech.
I am the only man who doesn't have adjective.
Slightly.
So what I am trying to emphasize is that the indigenous demand has to be created. When you can create the demand, when you improve the economic standards of the people. But ultimately the real incomes, as I said, in the post-liberalization period, the real incomes of the people has been considerably gone down, and they are not constituting the aggregate demand for the goods in this country. And the second alternative is outsourcing. Though we have been trying to create a outsourcing base in this country, we are unable to face the competition at a global level because of, as I said, quality, at the cost, because the inputs are costly in this country. So these are all the reasons which the government needs to address. And next, one of my suggestions is, madam, that thrust has to be given to improve the productivity and increase expenditure in infrastructure, both agriculture, industry, like transportation, roads. Of course, government is doing extremely well as far as roads are concerned. And these investments has to be, I have been telling, there is a strong complementarity between the private investment and public investment. Unless you increase the public investment, it is very difficult to get private investment in this country, for which you have to mobilize the resources, savings of the people, for which you have to provide incentives for savings also. Not only to improve the economic conditions of the people so that people can create more demand for the goods, not only that, they can save something and pump into the industrial sector. So what I am trying to say is, even at the expense of increasing the fiscal deficit, as long as revenue deficit is not increasing, as long as you take care of the revenue deficit, even at the expense of increasing the fiscal deficit, you have to invest in sectors like irrigation, power, roads, etc. So that more demand can be created, more facilities can be created for this economy. And the next aspect which I wanted to emphasize, madam, capital expenditure has to be increased. And we have been, it is a very difficult task for the government. Governments, for a period of time, they have been claiming and they have been promising the nation, but they have failed to achieve it. Reduce the revenue expenditure and increase the capital expenditure, so the more amount can be grow into the creation of the capital assets.
How many more papers are there?
No, madam, I am referring. No, there are more papers. Just I am giving an impression that I am seeing the papers.
Okay, wind up.
So the final aspect, because I have been continuously disturbed, so I lost the track into making the suggestions to the government.
It's the job of the chair to disturb you if you go beyond time. I'm paid for it.
We are yet to get that immunity. So I should congratulate the minister for presenting this document, madam, the first of its kind in the country. Earlier, never it was submitted to the nation, but there is no room for complacency. And whatever the positive figures you have given, or the earlier speakers were telling, we should not feel elated with this, because your low rate of inflation is not real, and the real foreign exchange reserves are also not out of the trade surplus. With the banks have gone abroad, banks have opened their branches, inviting deposits from the foreigners and remitting into the country. That has constituted your 60 billion deposits, so United dollars deposits. So these are all the real, once you make an analysis, the picture is not that gloomy. So we have to take serious efforts and try to analyze the things in a proper way and initiate measures to achieve this 8% growth, which has to be done. Otherwise, there will be a lot of disturbance in this country. Thank you, madam.
Thank you very much. Ramashankar Kaushik, absent. You are Mr. Kaushik? You are not. So, Mr. Virumbi?
Madam Deputy Chairperson, thank you very much for having given me an opportunity to say something on the mid-year economic review. Madam, this for the first time ever independence, the mid-year review is being submitted to the Parliament for its consideration. At the outset, I thank the Honorable Finance Minister, because he is the Minister of Investment. There is a Minister of Disinvestment is there. He is the Minister of Investment. That's why it's very important. Madam, this is, our economy is actually the mixed bag. This particular thing, what they have submitted us, it's a mixed bag. Madam, regarding the 2002, I'll go to the subject directly. There is no time to justify or explain it. Madam, the current account surplus in the last year is about 0.3%. That is how our economy functions, I tell. The export showed 13.5%. The dollar terms last year it's improved. Madam, several people have quoted about the China. They wanted to compare with the China. I tell you here the NPA is 8% of the GDP, while in China and public sector institutions and other things, 50% of the GDP is NPA in China. That we have to keep in mind. Madam, the revenue in the 6 months, it has increased by 16%. Net tax revenue has increased by 27%. Madam, the industrial development index, it clearly shows that 5.6% has been increased from April to October. Because of that, there is a move in the upward directions in the housing loan by 25% per annum. And also, the government has to see that the food processing industry is further developed, because the total production of the vegetables and fruits, only 1% is being utilized for the food processing. That the government has to keep in mind. Then the export growth further increased by 23% from April to August. That is, according to the statistics given with the Director General of the Commercial Intelligence and Statistics, it is a welcome one. Madam, regarding the inflation, I want to tell one thing: inflation is less than 4%. But one thing, food security and purchasing power, it is a problem. Because of food security, the inflation may come down. Because of the less purchasing power of the people at that time, because of the less demand, inflation may come down. The government has to be very careful whether it is due to the food security or due to the less purchasing power. Because of the drought, purchasing power has completely drowned. That they want to see. I say, just to see that purchasing power of the people is further enhanced. Purchasing power in the rural peoples can be enhanced. Already the government is going in that direction. One is National Highway Development Program. Number 2, village road projects. Like that, if the rural industry is developed, purchasing power will be developed. Madam, the next point is some packages. The banks, we have done it. UTA, we have done it. IDBI, from the National Industrial Credit Long-Term Operations, more than 1,150 crores has been already given by the government, got from that and given to the IDBI. Madam, the problem is now the right direction we are going. At the same time, there will be problem, I suppose. One thing I said, securitization bill is passed. I wanted to emphasize to the Honorable Finance Minister through you, Madam, securitization bill should be implemented up to 2002. We find there is a sound we are hearing that is only 1998 or 1999 or 2000 they wanted to say. I request the Honorable Finance Minister to see that securitization, even in 2002, if there is NPA, you just put them behind the bar according to the law of the land and see that the people's money is collected for. That is one request. Madam, our finance is all right, because I tell you, with the World Bank finance, 69 projects and ongoing projects with $12.9 billion is going on throughout the country. $1.6 billion already accepted by 2002-2003. Then $1.9 billion next year, 2003-2004, by the World Bank's projects. It's going on throughout the country. It's a good cigarette. It's not so that people say it's some gloomy situation. It's not so. And also International Finance Corporation, 84 companies that portfolio. So far it's running with the help rendered by the Industrial Finance Corporation. It's another. Madam, the average number of the years taken to settle the tax assessment orders, now it's a decline. It should be declined. It is a welcome step. Then, Madam, the foreign exchange reserves, it's reached 67 billion. It's due to when the rupee became the dearer, the inflows from the export earnings increased. It is a welcome step. Therefore, it's not gloomy as somebody wants us to picture it. It's not gloomy. Madam, the next is, Madam, to increase the revenue. I said the domestic savings should be increased. For that, I request the Honorable Finance Minister through you, Madam, when they wanted to deposit, the deposit amount should be in safe. Such a type of feeling should be there. If the financial institutions and banks, if it goes to the private people, the people may hesitate to put the deposit there. Therefore, whenever the people put the deposit, there should be a deposit insurance. Keynesian theory should be applied. More public expenditure from the government coffer should be increased further. Madam, the SEBI has to be tightened. It is not, say, we clearly shows the scams. So, through you, madam, I wanted to say something to the Honorable Finance Minister. The Minister can increase our income further by 4,000 crores. It's left out through the budget for last decade, I can say. One, for cigarette, they are doing only for the length of the cigarette, not on the based on the quality of the tobacco. If you add the tobacco quality also in the excise duty, further 1,500 crores the government coffer will get. It is one. Number two, that is the railway department diversifications. They are selling under the name of scrap crores of rupees. If it is a diversification, if it is done at least the rolling mills, re-rolling mills, 4 re-rolling mills. Either you can yourself and establish, or you can have some joint venture, you can have the contract with some peoples, with private peoples also. Instead of selling as a scrap, if it is converted into the value added products, further between 2,000 to 3,000 crores, every year you will get it. Within these two things, if you consider the budget, more than 4,000 crores the government can add in the revenue. That is number three. Then, madam, the construction of the buildings, I say, we wanted to disinvest something in the hotels and other things. Instead of selling the hotels to the private people, what I say, the government are building, they have their own plan to construct the buildings for further offices. What I say, instead of selling to the at the market rate, we can utilize the same buildings and stop constructing the buildings for the same purposes. Suppose the Ashok Hotel is there, means you can open some office, government office there. Instead of disinvestment, it will be used, instead of constructing new buildings and selling at the same time the buildings what we have, turn the thing, think over it. Instead of disinvestment the buildings can be utilized for some other things, and also for this recycling process, we have never attempted it. That also has to do it. Sometimes that temporary phenomena may affect our economy. For example, I tell you, Bangladesh recently, they have actually 45% import duty has cut down for edible oils to 15% for festival season. Ours is 65%. Immediately what the people have done, that is RBD.